love this place. I mean, Key Biscayne is just—it's unique. There's nowhere else like it. I mean, I talk to people who've been here a lot longer than me, and they say it's changed, and there's, but it's still a great place to live. It's still got a lot to offer. You can't find this anywhere else, not in the United States, and I don't think there's too many places like this in the world.
And how would you describe it to someone else who did not know it?
You know, I depends on who it is, but generally I say it's a small, idyllic town in the tropics, is what I try and convey to them. You know, my daughter can ride her bike. She's 10 and she can ride her bike anywhere she wants on Key Biscayne. People are always looking out for her. I know that if she's out, you know, there's people watching her, and I want a community. I want to be part of a community where people know me, they know my family, and they're looking out for me, and they know I'm looking out for them. And so that's what Key Biscayne is. Key Biscayne retains something that, to a large degree, I think's been lost in modern times.
Other communities.
Yeah, I think people have lost a sense of neighbor, have lost a sense of community, and I think we still do have that. I think sometimes it gets frustrated, but for the most part, it's there and people care.
Welcome. Thank you guys. Thank you to Theo for hosting, Biscayne Nature Center staff, Tracy and Nancy and Andrew for organizing all of this. Welcome to My Miami Story Key Biscayne edition. Are you familiar with what happens here? Or how it happens? It's somewhat like speed dating. We're going to sit down at different tables, and everybody's going to share a little bit about themselves and also talk about the topic cards at each of the tables. And the idea behind this is to learn about each other and to share what brought you to Miami, how long you've been here, but specifically Key Biscayne. How'd you find the island? What do you love about the island? And then the topic cards. I want to thank our mayor for being here. He has a very big council meeting tonight. Oh, our historian, Joan Gilblank. Thank you, Joan. Our resiliency coordinator, Kat, is here. You guys all have to fill out a paper at the end, and if I don't say this, I'm in big trouble, to prove that we did this. We also have Terry, who's filming. Theo, you want to say something?
No, welcome everyone. No, I think we should get the show on the road and to hear all the stories.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you guys.
Charlie Crandon, who came to my grandfather, his older sister and younger brother, and said, wouldn't it be nice if we could have 2 miles of oceanfront beach on Key Biscayne? If you give it to us, we'll give you a causeway. Well, the causeway had to be built because what good is a park if you can't get to it? There was a gentleman named Ed Ball who was the brother-in-law of Alfred I. DuPont from Jacksonville. And Alfred I. DuPont had passed away, but Ed Ball was running the estate. And Ed Ball bought the bonds for the causeway. Now, the family gave Crandon Park 950 acres in 1940, and they started building a causeway. Well, in December 41, you know what happened? So all that steel had to go to tanks and ships and stuff, so they stopped construction on the bridge. Well, they resumed construction after the war, and on May 9th, 1947, they opened the causeway. And the toll was 50 cents. 50 cents.
And it stayed that way for a long time.
Well, no.
That would have been a lot.
Okay, that was
Well, let me tell you the story. What happened is nobody came over here.
Yeah, it was too expensive.
It was too high.
Right.
So Ed Ball, the man who bought all the bonds, $3 million, plus before that was finished, it was another $3 million. So he bought $6 million worth of bonds to pay for the bridge. Crandon had retired. Crandon retired in 1940. He was a commissioner for 20 years. He goes to the county commissioners and says, look, I'm not getting my money. You're not paying me back on a regular basis here. Plus, you're not paying me enough. So he says, here's what we're going to do. Now, this is Ed Ball. He says, we're going to cut the toll in half. So then they made it 25 cents, and it was 25 cents for years. For years.
Yeah.
You know what it is now? $2.25.
25, yes.
Unless you're a resident over here.
Yeah, they're different.
All right. So anyway, that's how Charlie Crandon got Crandon Park for the people of Dade County and their guests, tourists. And
So I found the bridge, and it was, I think it was 25 cents to take and drive over. And I drove and I drove, and the only other thing I said to him, well, this is fine, but when I get on the island, how will I find it? And he had said, well, it's after the big barn, turn left toward the ocean. Okay.
Crandon Park, of course, is a beautiful place, and the causeway fabrication was begun before the Second World War. They put in some of the fill, and the University of Miami, which was very short of money, sold fill to the causeway project because they needed money and the causeway needed fill. So Lake Osceola on University of Miami's campus is essentially the pit that was left when they excavated the fill for the causeway. So long time connection between University of Miami and the Key. The process of building the causeway was suspended during the war for lack of steel and strategic materials, and then it was restarted upon the completion of the war. And then Crandon, Charlie Crandon, was one who did publicity in the newspaper to try to raise awareness to help create a park here in Key Biscayne. In fact, there's two of them, and we can thank the Mathesons for providing land which could be used to build this beautiful park that we're recording in right now, and the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Nature Center is built in. So the history of the place, of course, goes long back before my time, but it's still 1971. I'm coming up on 50 years in the near future, and I've enjoyed this place, biking through it as well as recreating here over the years.
each of the four brothers, my father and his three brothers, each had a little piece of land over here. And one of them put up a little chip and putt golf course, the Key Colony.
Right there.
And okay, and then the Isle Away Motel, which was right there on the right about where the library is now. And then my father built the Jamaica Inn and the English pub. And he built some apartments on Fernwood right behind the Jamaica Inn. I think they're still there.
They're still there.
Okay. And then my other two uncles didn't do anything to their land. They kept it in coconuts, and that was where the Grand Bay Ritz-Carlton project is now. That's right. No, that's right. It was on that two pieces of 40-acre property there. And
Beach cottage. 1,000 feet of ocean beach. Out on Key Biscayne. Well, that was fine, except I'd never heard of Key Biscayne. Where was that? I mean, this was the early 50s, and who knew of Key Biscayne? And so I read on, and there were funny little notes in it that one of the Mathesons had written, and it said, "You will probably need a dog, a watchdog. The grass is cut." I mean, he went to Yale, right? So he's writing in his best Yale stuff. He said, "You will find the grass about 3 feet or 2 feet, but not much higher than that." Oh, and I got more and more excited about it.
You were not discouraged.
No. Where is Key Biscayne? And he said, "Oh, just go down to Main Highway and you'll find it. Just go down a distance and you'll find it."
I lived in Miami Shores, grew up there. I came here to the island in '66 and rented a house with a roommate. She flew for Pan Am and I flew for National. And I started dating my husband about the same time, who was a fourth generation Miamian. And his grandmother built a house in the 20s on 96th Street, and she said they were in the country. And we said, Nana, why didn't you buy land on Key Biscayne? And she said, it was mosquitoes, there was no way to get there, and it was hot.
To the beach park, you know, past the kind of the grassy lawn, the pavilion and everything. And as I came up the boardwalk and saw the ocean in front and the palm trees blowing and just this beautiful ocean and beach scene, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm living in paradise. And so when to the people ask where I live or what I love about where I live, I just think that those beautiful ocean view. Now the people are more important, but when I think of the Key, I think of just cresting the boardwalk and seeing the ocean.
Well, I don't live on Key Biscayne, but
You're a part of it.
I've worked here a long time, or I built a very beautiful contribution to Key Biscayne. So as a stay-at-home mother and as a volunteer, I had met Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and it was her dream to build a nature center by the sea. And just as a volunteer, I helped raise $4 million, and we built the nature center, and I'm still here after all those years. So it's very dear to me. It's like my own little project, you know, and just coming over that bridge every morning. I only live 8 miles away along the Miami River in an old historical home. When we first got married, my husband grew up on Palm Island on Miami Beach, and I used to take my boys to Cape Florida every morning. There was a little mothers group that got together, and we met there every morning at 9:30. And so I said to my husband, and he grew up in like a 22-room mansion, and I said, I want to buy a house on Key Biscayne because it's so close to the park. So I took him to see a house, a Mackle house, and he walked in the door, and he walked to the kitchen, and he said, I could reach out the kitchen window and touch the house next door. And he walked out the door, and the realtor was like, what happened? Is there something wrong? And he was like, you can't have neighbors that close. and you know, you could kick yourself because when we got married, the house we were looking at was $150,000, you know. But anyway, so I always wanted to live on Key Biscayne, but I don't. So I live in a rather big house, a historical home that you can't see the neighbors from our house.
I moved down in 2003 from New York. My wife and I at the time were both lawyers in New York, and we were tired of spending just one weekend a year at the beach in a very shortened beach season. And so we decided we wanted to move to Florida. And so it was a good move. I was actually interviewing at firms downtown, and my wife had a job. And so she said she was going to go look at places to live. I knew I didn't want to live in Miami Beach proper. I didn't want what I considered to be, no disrespect to Miami Beach, Manhattan light. I wanted a more relaxed community. And Lisa came out here and she found Key Biscayne. She said, I found this great spot. It's got great beaches. I found a great apartment. By the way, I've rented it, so I hope you like it. And so I said, okay. So I literally, the first time I ever came out here was at night. She drove me out. We drove to the towers. She said, that's the building we're going to live in. I said, looks great. Turned around, went back to our hotel, and flew back to New York. And we were back down here 2 months later, a month later. A month later, we were down here permanently.
You said 93?
2003.
Oh, 2003.
16 years.
Very nice.
So yeah, I have not regretted a minute.
Well, I grew up in West Palm Beach. Went to high school there. After I married, we came to Miami. My husband was in medical school here, and then he decided to stay and practice. And we lived in Kendall, and then on the water, Gables. And so when he passed away, I decided I didn't want to go to live with it where any of my children lived, Cleveland, Atlanta, and Orlando. So I said I wanted to stay in Miami because I was used to it. And my oldest daughter said, Mom, if you're going to stay in Miami, you have to live near the water because you did before. We loved it. So that's how I found the condo of the towers in Key Biscayne. And I've enjoyed living here very much. I'm not an ocean swimmer.
But I always loved Key Biscayne, and I love nature, and I love being outdoors. I love being here. And when I met my husband, Key Biscayne, I'm like, well, I can live in Brickell if you like, but I'm gonna live in Key Biscayne. So, and now you can't get enough.
We lived in Philadelphia and New Jersey, and we were searching for a warm climate because we had a sailboat. And we just wanted to have more than 3 months of the year to enjoy it. So
I grew up in Miami because my father was born in Miami, and his father moved here in 1912. That was my grandfather, and so, and his father came down here in 1904, bought a piece of property and built a house, and so that's how we ended up here. My grandfather started living here, having graduated from college. He came back to Miami and had 4 boys. He and his wife had 4 boys here in Miami, one of them being my father. And so my father was born in Coconut Grove, 1914. And then my father got married, had 3 children, and I was away for about 20 years, but then I came back and I've been here all of my life except for 20 years. And my father lived here for a while, back in about 65, and that's when he built a little house down in Cape Florida Development, where the Pines canals are. But no family member ever lived here. They lived on Coconut Grove. Even the Mashta house, which was there on the tip, which was never occupied, any length of time. Maybe overnight, but that was it.
Did y'all own a house that still spills?
No.
No. Bruce's uncle was my landlord.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that was.
What do you think of when you think Key Biscayne?
Well, for me, it's very clear that I moved here in 1968.
A little before me.
And some of my best friends are still from that era. Everyone from Lou Mark Antonio, which I think you probably met over the years, right? Al Del Greco, who was an NFL star. Scott Sim, who was the son of a silver medalist in the Olympics. Jay Yeager, Doug Tellum, who's a longtime Key Biscayne resident. These are all my longtime friends. So whenever I think of Key Biscayne, it's clearly that. As catching iguanas too, by the iguanas are not new, guys. They were there when we were there, just more of them now. So I remember Key Biscayne as a very pleasant small place. It's still a good place, but I remember very long friendships over 50 years now.
But I enjoy the community center so much, the different activities that they have there, the luncheons and the friendships that I've made here in Key Biscayne. That's what I've enjoyed most.
We came here in 1971. We ate hot dogs at the hot dog stand where Mabel Miller did her nature talks and her nature teachings. And we rode through Crandon Park Zoo, which was then in action. So there were, if you rode through the zoo on your bicycle, you would hear the lions roar if it was feeding time. You'd have to watch out on the bike path because there would be peacocks wandering around. And so it was an obstacle course, but a very pleasant one, riding from Key Biscayne down to the lab at the Rosenstiel School, where I have worked then and I still work today. So I've been coming here to Crandon Park for a very long time. It's a beautiful spot.
the pro would go home at 5 o'clock, and everybody on the Key knew it. So you'd meet everybody you knew on the Key at 5 o'clock to play 9 holes of golf.
Joe, but I haven't seen you. Are you a long-time Key Biscayne?
Only since 1951.
1951?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. My back door neighbors were the Mark Antonios. You remember that name?
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were. I was 180 Buttonwood, and they were 175 Hampton Lane.
They built that house by themselves. And she, Carol, told the story when she sold it. She was telling me how they built it. Like they literally put the cinder blocks up and were working on the house.
Could have been, if I recollect, that was some sort of GI purchase of 16,000 something.
I rode on that merry-go-round when I was 2 years old.
So I never got to do that. I don't even remember the old zoo.
Oh.
By the time I got here, it was already taken apart.
But I am not totally happy the way
Okay.
I have a theory about it.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. Key is only like 1 square mile, right? Village. 1.1 square miles. So before 2000, before the ocean shift, you had maybe 8,000 people, and now you have double the amount of people in the same 1.1 square mile. So say like 1 out of 10 people is a jerk, or sometimes a jerk. Your chances of running into that person have like doubled because there's more of the same exact place, but just with more jerks around, you know? And so, I mean, it's got to do with that, with culture and things like that of people coming from a lot of different places, and so they're not as rooted, and so maybe they don't care as much about community. That can happen too. But really, just cramming so many people into one space, you're going to have a bit of more jerks that you're going to run into, and traffic and all that stuff.
I worked at Yacht Haven.
Oh, did you?
So I worked at it was the Bridge, that was the bar.
Okay.
And then I worked at Coral World. I was a diver at
Did
Coral
you?
World.
Okay. Was this pre-Maryland, pre-95, or?
Yeah. It was before I got wiped out.
Yeah,
I was a diver.
As in
Underwater, scuba.
I was going to say below or above the water.
Underwater.
Okay.
Underwater. Used to feed the sharks for the tourists.
Cool.
Got bit twice.
One of the pleasures of being on Key Biscayne back in the 50s and 60s was that the beach side had very little on it. And we would go for many days without seeing anybody but the other people who lived in the other couple of cottages. So it was just our place, and it was like a South Sea island, which was really dreamy. We might hear people shouting for help who were running aground or who didn't know where they were. And we kept a ring, a life-saving ring at the house, and a long line. And we would run down to the beach in the middle of the night and go save people.
So these were.
And going forward, what do you think will happen to Key Biscayne? I mean, now you are the mayor, and I don't know how that happened. Perhaps you can tell us.
Well, I appreciate your support, Joan.
Yes, right. Well, actually, I ended up voting for you.
Thank you very much. No, how do I see us going forward? Look, we've got a lot of work to do. I mean, we do have things, we have major issues that have to be addressed. We're talking about water quality. Water quality is just a critical issue for this community. We're a beach town. We rely on the water. And we've also got to be thinking about the future. I mean, we are seeing sea level rise. We're seeing, these king tides are higher than anybody's seen them before. If you go down to the Key Biscayne Yacht Club, you see their courtesy dock is underwater at times. And so if we're seeing those things, we've got to start planning for the future. We've got to start doing things with our construction code. We've got to start thinking, are we going to raise our roads? And if we're going to raise our roads, what are we going to do for the neighbors who might be impacted for that? What are we going to do about our beaches, our renourishment? And, how are we going to positively impact the bay? How are we going to deal with our stormwater runoff so that we're not adding to the kill-off of all the seagrasses in the bay?
My uncle had a Texaco gas station as the last business before you enter the park, coming northbound on Crandon Boulevard. It was the little Texaco station right there on the right. Now, when they closed that station down, they had to remove the tanks. So when they did, they excavated a big hole, and they had probably 3 or 4 tanks there underground. The hole that was left for a short time, you could see the tide go up and down.
in
Yes,
that hole.
in that hole. Right.
I've been here, Joan, you've been here since 51. I've been here since 68. I have never, except during a hurricane, seen the tide as high as it is now. Have you?
I have upon occasion after hurricanes.
After hurricanes, but not in quote normal tide. Do you recall normal tides ever being this high? That were not hurricane related?
I do actually.
Okay.
But it was right before we were renourishing, and there was so much erosion.
You're talking about in 87? Okay.
And earlier,
I have
right.
photos of that.
Major erosion.
What would you like to see change moving forward based on the current Miami?
Well, they certainly ought to plan on sea level rise.
Right.
No, I think it was Donna in 64, about 64. They supposedly had 3 foot of water over the whole island. And so, that just needs to come into the mainstream of the consciousness going forward, because you're going to have a problem. I mean, all you have to do is go by the marina at a king tide, and if you go on the southbound lanes of Crandon Boulevard, you'll see the water right up to the edge of the road.
We can't pretend these things aren't happening. We can't pretend that we can't find. So we can find solutions. We just have to work on it.
You can pretend, but they're going to still
Right,
happen.
that's right. We can't, but we can't. It's not.
But we have
as
to.
mayor, I can't pretend
Right.
that things are.
But we
have to make things better.
must move forward on anything that is possible to do
Absolutely.
to
100%.
fight this.
Absolutely.
Say my main concern with the Key and with Miami itself is overdevelopment and not taking care of their structures that they have or are bringing them up to date. The Bear Cut Bridge is a main concern for me. The sewer plant is a major concern for me. And I think even Key Biscayne, we've way overdeveloped what we have here, and I think that creates to all the problems with the water and climate change and everything, and traffic, just everything in general. So I was glad I got to enjoy it when it was still a little laid-back community, so to speak.
That everyone becomes stronger stewards than they've been.
The fill-a-bags.
Some of us at this table are strong stewards.
I know.
We're here to help.
Right.
So.
I'm hopeful. People talk about the changing dynamics of the island and people, but I'm still hopeful. People do care.
Yep.
People are definitely involved. People pay attention for the most part. They're trying to be a part of the community.
Are you speaking? You're speaking about not only Key Biscayne, but you're speaking for the world, I think.
I'm speaking for the planet,
Yeah,
yes.
I agree with that.
Yes.
But on the Key, I think we are doing a great many things, and I think we can do more.
It sounds
Well,
like.
the first house that we lived in was in Mashta.
Yes.
On North Mashta, not on the water side, but on the inside.
Right.
And it was an old house. And in one of the closets, there was a penciled-in water line from that hurricane that you're talking about.
Right.
And it came up to here,
Yeah.
just right to my hip.
Right.
So the water came right over Mashta, and that's before we had the rising tide.
But it all disappeared within hours,
Yeah.
because it either went down into the ground or just drained off. Now, we'll tell you
Yes, the garage gets flooded, and in order for us to leave the building, we have to go through the lower garage. And I feel sorry for the people that have cars there because they have to have boots to get to their car.
One of the biggest disadvantages people have at the moment is the lack of information. You have a lot of information, but how do you sift through all that data to see how it's going to affect you,
I would say about 125.
Wow.
I counted them one time, and that was about 6-7 years ago. I had 75, and I buy at least 10 or 12 a year, so give or take some.
So are you going to open a used
She could.
clothing store to repurpose the dresses that you have and raise money for?
I never give any away. That's the trouble.
Rafa, where do you think Theo's from?
know.
Take a guess. Any guesses?
South Carolina.
South Carolina?
Oh, I was gonna guess the Carolinas.
Really?
Virginia?
I'll give you a hint. Would you like a cup of coffee?
New York City. Everybody know Theo's husband?
Yes.
I met my husband here in Miami. He's born and raised here in Miami, and his sister and I were roommates in college up in New York City. We met, he lived on Miami Beach, and the rest is history. We've been together, we said 46 years. Can you imagine?
Impressive.
And what does he do?
He's a professional motorcycle racer.
So can you picture all of those lilies on the back? How did you find this little bit of paradise?
I was lucky when I first came to Miami. I met a lady named Lily Neal, and she had a little boy named Giles, and I had a son, Justin, and they were about 6 weeks in age difference. And Lily said, "Oh, you have to come to Cape Florida." And the two of us would drive to Cape Florida every morning at 9:30. We had a standing date with the two little boys who were like 2 years old. And we'd go to Cape Florida every day and come back at about noontime. And then the boys would sleep all afternoon and we could get things done at the house. So that was my first love of Key Biscayne and Cape Florida. My son Justin, who I took to Cape Florida every day, eventually got married there last year in March in front of the lighthouse. And it was like, wow, you know, it really must have meant something to him that he went there every day as a little kid. Because we did that for years. I mean, I was lucky enough to be a stay-at-home mother. And even if it was cloudy and rainy, we still went. The kids loved, you know, being in the rain and stuff. And we used to walk all the little old trails. And back then there was a million Australian pine trees, so totally different than it is now. So that was my first love of Key Biscayne. And then when I met Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and it was her dream to have a nature center by the sea, I was a member of the Junior League of Miami, and the Junior League took it on as a project to help Marjorie make it a community effort to raise money to build a permanent nature center by the sea for visitors and for residents of Miami. Because as you know, Marjorie loved nature. She thought it was important that everyone should know what's in your own backyard. And that's basically what we do at the Nature Center. Everything you see there is just right from here, right from Crandon Park.
Has everybody been to the Nature Center here?
Yeah.
If you have
There's
nothing.
no escape if you know Theo.
Really a cultural center. You can go and see the latest artists, have great talks on a number of things, and it's kind of like this hidden treasure. And I tried to take my kids last weekend, but we snuck in with a golf cart, which and at some point we were caught.
Come to the Nature Center and come to Crandon Park more often.
Yes.
So I have a plan that you would just go down that little path to Calusa and then come across and then come through the last entrance where Joni Gill blanked the little cottages. So you get to see a little bit of history that way too, coming in the back way. I just think it's a perfect fit, and then you're not getting in your car to come here. I was thinking of going to one of the council meetings and making my idea public. So we'll do that this winter.
Thank you guys for coming. Please fill out the survey. Everybody who helped set it up, Tracy, Nancy, Andrew, Terry, thank you guys.
Thank you all for coming.
Key Biscayne today is a young, modern village that we would like to remain living in spite of rising waters and climate change. If we borrow or draw upon some lessons from the island's rich historical and environmental past, we might be able to live in a sustainable future. The first villagers were Tequestas as they were the first island stewards. They knew not to overuse or to abuse our land and water. They held the land in trust. Now, in the overpopulated, overpolluted, and stressed 21st century, the threats and actuality of rising water, king tides, and changing climate now affect our lives, our beaches, our coastlines, our plants, and all living creatures on our island and on this planet. We must relearn and adapt and rediscover and invent ways to conserve and to preserve, renew and repair our structures, needs, and resources to realize the meaning of sustainability on and off our island, our so-called island paradise. We must support our planners and assume responsibilities as coastal custodians, vigil and resistant and courageous. My friends, we live on a treasured and historic sand island, long designated as environmentally sensitive. But now we look face to face at a crocodile, smiling in the steaming hot sun on our currently fouled beach. There's an old song that tells of a crocodile meeting a lady on the water's edge. And she climbed on his back, and then the croc slid into the Nile. And the song finishes, at the end of the ride, the lady was inside, and a smile on the crocodile.